I'd now like to introduce our first panel discussion this morning, Where UX is Winning Government. This panel will explore the importance of user experience and taking a holistic approach to customer service. You'll hear case studies from 2 federal agencies who have transformed the way their services are delivered by emphasizing design and analytics. Please help me welcome to the stage Jessica Barrett-Simpson, who's the Senior Advisor for the Borrower Experience of Federal Student Aid in the Department of Education, Michelle Causey, who's the Director of User Experience and Design at IRS, not an insignificant customer experience. And moderating today is Eric Keller, who's the Senior Manager for Research at the Partnership for Public Service. Please join me in welcoming the panel.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Keller from the Partnership for Public Service. I work on a program there to help improve the customer experience in government. We collaborate with Accenture on that work. Very excited to be moderating the first panel today. So as was just mentioned, we're starting on a positive note. This is where user experience is winning in government, and we've got panelists from 2 agencies where the user experience is winning, or at least they are making some solid progress in improving how digital services are delivered to the public. So we have with us, again, Jessica Barrett-Simpson, who's a Senior Advisor for the Borrower Experience at Federal Student Aid within the Department of Education, and Michelle Causey, who's the Director of User Experience and Design at the IRS. So we will let each of them kind of introduce themselves, talk to us a little bit about their organizations, who their citizens are, how they are constantly seeking to understand the needs of the users that they serve, and talk a little bit about some of the exciting work that they have underway. So Michelle, why don't you get us started and tell us a little bit about your division within the IRS and the things that you're working on.
Sure, absolutely. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to join you today to talk about user experience and design. I am Michelle Causey. I am the Director of User Experience and Design for the IRS. My office is actually housed in the Office of Online Services, which has been in existence since 2010. And I've been with the service for approximately 6 years. And I started on the Affordable Care Act program within the IRS doing technical development. And after that, I transitioned to the Office of Online Services, where I've held positions such as the Product Development Director. I've led efforts such as the Where's My Refund Status Tracker, Where's My Amended Return, IRS Direct Pay, and a number of other initiatives and endeavors that we've completed successfully over the years. User experience and design has always been a fundamental capability in the products and services that we've delivered within the Office of Online Services. But just recently, within the past year and a half, we now have a dedicated focus on user experience and design, where we are trying to establish that capability internal to the agency, and doing that by educating not only our employees, but also our stakeholders and business partners and the external ecosystem. In addition to that, I've also served as Director of the Portal Business Office, so I have a vast knowledge of our infrastructure internally, which has been a great asset as we look to translate that individual front-end customer experience and how we can leverage that with our back-end systems to provide that capability and the data. But our UX office, I've been in my position now for a year, and we have approximately 6 employees, federal employees, and we have a team of 25 vendors supporting us in our journey as we try to grow the effort. I'm hoping that many of you have seen on USA Jobs, I had 2 announcements that recently closed. We're looking to expand our practice to an additional 10 to 15 employees, because this is very important and central to our mission, particularly as the agency is moving forward to the future state, which is improving the customer experience for the American taxpayer.
Great.
So thank you.
Great, thank you. Jessica, why don't you tell us a little bit about your work at FSA and some of the initiatives that you are working on.
Good morning. Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm in the Office of Federal Student Aid at the U.S. Department of Education. We have about 1,300 employees, and we provide $125 billion in federal student aid to over 13 million students to help them pay for higher education. I'm within our Customer Experience Office, which was created in 2010, so we've got about 6 years. In this Customer Experience Office, we've got about 100 employees, and our role is really to identify what the customer needs are, figure out what their expectations are, measure their satisfaction with our products and services, and then identify ways that we can make improvements. So our main customers are prospective students, parents, borrowers. You are probably familiar with the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and some of the improvements that have happened with that over the years. That's within the customer experience office, and we process about 19 million applications each year for federal student aid. And my team focuses specifically on the borrower experience and also on what we call the integrated student experience, which is really focused on that digital work and trying to have a seamless look and feel with all of our website properties and the experience that the customer has from across the entire student aid lifecycle. So from the time that they are figuring out where they want to go to college, they're applying for federal student aid, then when they're in college, and when they're repaying their loans. And we've really tried to emphasize the borrower experience more in recent years. The standard 10-year repayment plan, back when students weren't taking out very much in federal student loans, they would pay their loans back over 10 years. That's not the case as often anymore when borrowers are taking out more and some of them are going to graduate school. And in many cases, they're extending their repayment for longer than 10 years, up to 20, 25 years. So we really have a long relationship with some of our customers. And so we're really trying to focus on ways that we can make improvements to that experience for our borrowers.
Great. So, I imagine one of the first steps for both of you and your organizations is trying to figure out just what that user experience is. What are the pain points that citizens have when interacting? What are the things that they like? What are the investments that you could make that would be the biggest impact on having a better user experience? So maybe you could both talk a little bit about how you seek to understand and really know what that user experience is, how you do that research and get that information and that feedback from citizens. And I'd be particularly interested to hear if there are any things that surprised you when doing that work, if there are ever times when getting that user feedback and information, you found something that maybe went against conventional wisdom or was something that you did not think necessarily was what the user experience was. Michelle, would you like to start?
Sure. So great point. Research is fundamental to any new user experience. Without research, you, in my opinion, cannot be successful. So one of the things that we do, we invest a lot of time in upfront research, getting to understand our customer segments. We do customer segmentation. Because we are the IRS, we engage with individual taxpayers, small businesses, self-employed individuals, large multinational corporations, tax-exempt government entity organizations, academia, et cetera. So it's very important, it's imperative that we understand each particular market, that we understand the demographics of our users, and we do that by creating personas, which are rooted in, supported by research, data, and analytics. We use those personas to go out and inform our designs as we coordinate with our various team members on our team. We have interactive designers, we have accessibility specialists, we have content strategists, which is a very, very important skill set to have on any UX team, because if we're going to design any online solution or online capability, it's important that we translate that technical jargon and our subject matter expertise, and in my particular case, tax law, into generic vernacular that can be embraced and understood by the American taxpayer. Because any experience that we create, we want it to be seamless, we want it to be intuitive, we want to empower the individual taxpayer so that they can self-serve in a very secure online environment. So research is fundamental. Without research, we cannot be successful. In terms of feedback loops, to the second part of your question, for every effort and initiative that we have underway today in relation to the future state, once we go out and we do research, we apply our learnings and our findings to the iteration of whichever product or service we're about to deliver. We embrace agile methodologies, iterative development. And so whenever we complete a development sprint or a design sprint, we incorporate that feedback and that research from focus groups. We actually get out and talk to taxpayers. That is imperative because we are the IRS and we have a lot of technical capability. And sometimes we limit our development of opportunities to the technical capability of our back-end systems and what's been the norm, that may not necessarily be what the taxpayer or the end user or customer wants. And so it's important for us to really put the customer's needs first and to not really approach every developmental opportunity from a technical perspective, but from a user behavior perspective. We also leverage predictive analytics because the American taxpayers, unlike the Department of Education, you're engaging with us usually throughout your lifetime, so long as you are, working or you have your organization. And so we have history, and we want to leverage that history and look at your behavior from the past so that we can give you customized options when you engage with our website in the future to tailor your experience, to make you feel unique, to make you understand that we want you to be compliant. Encouraging voluntary compliance is one of the key goals and objectives of the service. And also we want to deter bad actors. And so by looking at analytics and data, if we see trends or anomalies within our systems that do not correspond with your traditional behavior, then we have metrics in place and technologies in place to help alert us so that we can prevent bad actors from infringing upon your credentials. So it's really important for us to really consider research in any and every effort that we have delivered. We've actually, many of you may or may not recall that we re-released our Get Transcripts application this past June. There we leveraged UX principles throughout the delivery of our secure access application, which is the front end to our Get Transcripts initiative. Looking at process flows, looking at journey maps, looking at personas, reevaluating the actual content on how you authenticate to access Get Transcripts. We did several iterations. I think the last time I checked our environment, we had well over 35 different iterations of what that front end looked like prior to the re-release of Get Transcripts this past June. So that's a key item of success for where UX has been instrumental. And satisfaction scores have gone up significantly since we made those improvements.
That's great. Jessica, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you all collect user feedback and whether you ever see anything in that feedback that surprises you that leads to exciting new initiatives?
So I would agree with Michelle on the importance of data. I've been with the Department of Education now for 10 years. 5 of those years were with Federal Student Aid, and I started out in our customer analytics office. And one of my first roles in the customer analytics office was to do customer segmentation. So that's something that we do as well. We do segmentation based on demographics. We look at age because we have your traditional college students, we have prospective college students, we also have non-traditional students. They have different sorts of needs, different sorts of behaviors. We also segment based on the life cycle in student aid, when they're applying, when they're in school, when they're in repayment, and the different stages of being in repayment. So when you're in grace, when you are in repayment, maybe you're in delinquency or you're in default. And we've looked at all of those different segments. You asked a question about what might be surprising and what sorts of things did we not expect to find. When we were doing segmentation based on the life cycle and we were looking at borrowers who were in default, one of the things that surprised us the first time that we did this was that borrowers who were in default had very low balances. And we were not expecting that. We were thinking that maybe borrowers were default on their loans because the balance was too high and they couldn't afford to pay it. But in a lot of cases, it was people who had gone to school for just 1 year and then they dropped out. They decided the school was not for them, and then they didn't pay back that small amount that they had taken out for that first year. So that has really helped us understand, and we've looked at other data as well. Why is it that people go into default? How can we help them? How can we use predictive analytics and figure out what are the predictors of default? How can we reach them earlier with some of our messaging? Within the customer experience office, we do something that we call customer listening. We get together on a monthly basis, and all of the parts of the organization that are touching the customer and that get customer feedback present data from the previous month. So we look at both quantitative and qualitative data. We're looking at website statistics, who's visiting what website, what are they doing, what are our common search terms. And then we're also looking at some of the qualitative feedback that comes in. We have a lot of feedback coming in through social media, through surveys. We have different customer satisfaction surveys that we do that measure satisfaction with different parts of the process. And the first time we've been doing this for several years now, but before I came to government, I worked in healthcare And I worked at a hospital and at a clinic where we did rounds. And it kind of reminded me a little bit, I was working at a teaching hospital where everyone would get together and they would talk about the patients that they had met that day, and you would get the perspective of the doctor, you would get the perspective of the nurse, the nutritionist, the social worker, and you would hear all these different perspectives on the same person, the same patient. And really what we're doing with customer listening is we're getting all of these different perspectives, all these different touch points, and we're looking at the same customers and saying, okay, well, this is what we're hearing in social media. This is what we're hearing from our ombudsman's office. This is what we're hearing from our call center. And we get that full picture that really helps us to understand what it is that our customer need, what they want from us. And it really does help us with our user experience design as we do that kind of iteration on some of our products and try to make improvements.
So Michelle, I know one of the big things you're working on at the IRS is helping to provide some real-time support to citizens on those digital channels. So things like live chat, co-browsing to be able to help people look at their tax documents and understand that information. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing there and any challenges that you're having to overcome with implementing these new strategies?
Sure. So as part of the future state, our primary objectives are to assist taxpayers with their pre-filing requirements. And so that requires educating the taxpayers on how to be compliant. And so we want to create a seamless experience across all channels within the service. So it's not just online. We want to look at how are taxpayers impacted if they call the IRS, if they walk into a walk-in center. If they do engage on irs.gov, we want to provide that capability to chat with a representative, which we currently have underway under Taxpayer Digital Communications is one of the various efforts that we have at the moment in support of future state. But we're also looking at creating a holistic omni-channel presence, because while it is more cost-effective to self-serve taxpayers online, there are some taxpayers who prefer to engage with the IRS through more traditional channels. And we want to make sure those channels are available, but we also want to make sure that we're very smart and intelligent about how we staff our organization. And if it makes more sense for us to have those interactions through online channels, we want to provide that capability so that way we can leverage our resources in the most efficient manner across the service. So in support of future state for the pre-filing requirements and education, we're looking at actually revamping our irs.gov website. Hopefully we have a 4 to 5 year plan, of course doing agile development by looking at content that may not be well read or enough hits on the website. We're looking at aging or archiving some legacy content. We're looking at improving the look and feel of the website. We're looking at making sure the website is responsive and adaptive so that if you are engaging with the IRS on a mobile device, be it a tablet or a smartphone, that the content will be tailored to your satisfaction versus just being online through a desktop, for example. In addition to that, you mentioned Taxpayer Digital Communications. So one of the things that we've heard from our taxpayers via tax forums and other efforts and endeavors is that they really would like to be able to correspond with the IRS directly electronically. And so we're looking at creating a secure webmail environment similar to what you may experience if you are communicating with your bank or your financial institution. You have a secure webmail platform where you can ask questions. You can upload documents, either in a PDF or a Word format or a GIF image or what have you. So we want to provide that capability to the tax community, ensuring that it's secure. Co-browsing, you mentioned, that would give, that speaks to our workforce as well as to the public, right? So that way taxpayers can upload documents if they're responding to a notice received from the IRS. And that way they can actually navigate those documents in that secure environment with a representative from the Internal Revenue Service. And that way they're looking at the same information at the same time, and they can address questions or look at potential adjustments that need to be made, et cetera. The online chat capability. So chat interactions are more cost effective than a traditional phone call to the IRS. For fiscal year 15, an average cost for an assister phone call was $55 per call. And that's significant for the service. Imagine the number of calls that we receive, particularly during filing season in January, February, and March. But the cost of an online transaction is less than $1. And many people who contact the IRS, they want basic information. Where's my refund? What's the status of my refund? Do I have a balance due? How much do I owe? When is my next payment due? And these are general questions that, just like with your own individual financial institutions, you can typically find out online, and we want to be able to provide that capability to the American public and encourage voluntary compliance. And so those are some of the initiatives that are underway that make sense. And actually, I would encourage all of you to actually look to irs.gov. Recently, we just launched earlier this week our first iteration of the account product, which will provide you with your balance due capability. And that product was actually delivered and developed using user experience design principles. And it's the first of many features to come. But of course, we have to make sure that it's secure. We want to get feedback from the public. We want to iterate on the actual application and provide different features moving forward. So. Great.
I've got a ton more questions, but I think we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that the audience has a chance to ask some as well. So I believe there's a microphone in the back of the room there. So I guess if folks have questions, go ahead and raise your hand, and they'll bring. We have one already? Excellent.
My name is Raul Cisneros, and question for the IRS. With resource challenges, I mean, there was a story in the Post about a year ago about people waiting in line in Dallas to talk to somebody, and there was a point in the line where if you were beyond that, you wouldn't be able to talk to somebody. So how is that jibe with what you're trying to do online? You know, and are you going to be more effective and be able to talk and interact with taxpayers versus somebody going into an office and let's say they want to go in and do that because I guess it's their prerogative, you know, to interact however they choose. So.
Yeah. Absolutely, it is a prerogative. We want to provide the best customer experience to all of our taxpayers. I'm very familiar with the situation that you've referenced. We actually now have an online scheduling tool or system to make appointments should you absolutely require a walk-in service. So hopefully that will not be the experience moving forward. It's been very successful for a number of our walk-in centers. But yes, so many of the times when taxpayers go into walk-in centers, it's because they have issues that they want to address or feel more comfortable speaking with an individual in person. And so as I said before, we're looking at improving the user experience and the customer experience across all channels, not just online. And so we have taken some measures to make sure that we don't have long lines and taxpayers aren't waiting hours on end at the walk-in centers in order to get the service that they so desperately need. But to that point, that also requires the education. And so, you know, we are evangelizing. There are certain services that you can, you know, seek yourself and self-serve online to avoid those long lines. But there will be those individual circumstances every so often that may warrant the conversation face-to-face with a representative, and so for that, you can schedule an appointment. Great.
I'm Larry from Postal Service OIG, and my question is about the Social Media Response Center. Does Department of Education and IRS has any social media response center where you're able to address the comments from the customers?
Yes, we are on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. And we do get a number of questions that we respond to. We push out a lot of content on social media, but we've really been seeing an increase in people using it as a way to get answers to their questions. And it really does provide us with a great opportunity because then those answers can be retweeted, they can be reshared, and we can really have our message be amplified by answering some of those individual questions. We also do something called what we call Twitter office hours, where in fact, I think we have one today. It's today. It's on student loan repayment, and we publicize those often on specific topics, like submitting the FAFSA or on getting information about your student loan repayment options. And that's a time where we take questions on Twitter and answer those during those office hours.
So at the IRS, we also have a social media presence. Just like the Department of Education, we are present on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We share a lot of information with the public via the social media channels, and we do monitor social media activity as one of our sources for analytics and information and contact analytics. And we are well in tune in terms of remarks and comments that are shared from the public, either via social media channels, just like we do our phone channels. We evaluate those contents and comments, and we look to the public, as always, even with our focus groups and the metrics that we receive through the social media channels, to look for new services to provide to the public, because we want to take your feedback into account. That's really important.
Good morning. Katiuska Tapia from DHS. Just curious to learn a little bit more about your secure web environment related to PII and also fraud. How do you come up with that and challenges, and did you gather feedback from customers?
Yes, so for our security, the IRS has been heavily involved in a security summit where we coordinate with stakeholders across not just the federal government space, but also private industry, because fraud and security are high priorities for both the private sector as well as the public sector. And so with the secure web channel and taxpayer digital communications, without appropriate authorization, access, and e-authentication, we want to make sure that your information is protected. That's the number one priority for the service. So personally identifiable information will only be shared in any secure webmail environment with the permission of the taxpayer.
Hi, my question is for Michelle. I'm Nicole from the Department of Education. You guys mentioned that you get the same questions all the time, which is similar to us. Have you looked into anything like chatbots or artificial intelligence and when looking at your future state and seeing if that can help at all?
That is on the roadmap. That's not a technology that we are currently evaluating, but it is part of our 4 to 5 month plan for consideration. So we haven't launched any pilots as of yet. Our first initial pilots with taxpayer digital communications includes the secure webmail feature, and I believe chat is on the Verizon for, I want to say, next year for us to start looking at that. We do have some chat capability today. We do have a vendor partner who is responsible for our IRS.gov help desk, and they currently administer emails and web chats to the public. There is no PII because the information that is shared in that environment is solely about the content that is currently available on IRS.gov. And so we're looking at that information as some of the predictors for what success may look like if we were to move forward to a chat environment with canned responses.
I have a question for both of you, Michelle and Jessica. In our corporate world, we used to live by a single-click, one-click experience for customers coming online. In your experience, serving the constituents, serving in a government agency, you have a lot of information to be disseminated to different constituents. What's your experience driving that optimization of what goes on the home page? How are the customers reaching the right content in minimum clicks possible?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I would, I guess, hold up as one example the FAFSA, which we've made great strides in improving it and simplifying it. There's still some push, of course, to make it even shorter. But when I went to college in the 90s, I filled out a paper FAFSA. I don't know if any of you ever did that. And I was talking to some people this morning whose their kids are filling out applications right now to go to college and filling out the FAFSA. And it's so much quicker than what they remembered when they originally went to school. Our customer satisfaction scores for the FAFSA are among the highest in government. And we've really made great strides. Also with the help of the IRS, because in 2010 we created the IRS data retrieval tool that would pull tax information into the FAFSA, and it really cut down on the amount of time that it took to fill out the form, and also improved the data accuracy and reduced the need for verification. So that was a major improvement. We've introduced skip logic and done a lot of things with the FAFSA to make improvements, to make it shorter and make it easier to complete. Our plans for next year are to make it mobile responsive. Right now it's not. Our first mobile responsive website was in 2012 with studentaid.gov. That was our integrated student experience project. And then we just recently made studentloans.gov mobile responsive as well. So those are some of our redesign, like our big redesign efforts, but we're also doing more of those iterative projects where we are trying to look at behavior on our website. What are the most commonly visited pages? What's the behavior? We've got website analytics that we're putting on all of our different sites to see kind of what is the journey that people are taking, what are the tasks that they're trying to do the most often, how long does it take them, how many clicks are there, as you mentioned. And we're really trying to focus on what are those top pages and how can we make improvements. And we're working with our designers and our developers to then do some prototypes, do usability testing, and make those improvements incrementally.
And so for the IRS, I can definitely tell you I just completed the FAFSA for my daughter in the partnership with Jessica's organization, Department of Education. It was a seamless process. It took me less than 12 minutes, and I was enthusiastic. It's like Jessica. I did the paper FAFSA in the 1990s, and I wanted to cry, for lack of better terms. But in terms of providing one-click service or seamless service for the American taxpayer, it's a challenge for us because our customer base is so large and so diverse. We have well over 40+ applications on IRS.gov, if not more, that all have different credentials for logging in for security. And that's just a product of just years of development without any true consideration for at a macro level of what that experience will look like. And because of budgets and resources, applications were developed incrementally to meet the taxpayer need. And our first step to consolidate those experiences is by delivering the account feature, for example. And so we've done that with Balance Due. Currently, if you check Where's My Refund, for example, you have 3 data elements that you have to submit that are vastly different than the 3 elements you have to submit for Where's My Amended Return. And so we're looking at another endeavor that we have as part of the future state is the e-authentication, authorization, and access, also known as EA3. We're looking at consolidating the credential and security requirements for certain applications so that we can provide access to those applications and that information in a single environment. And then depending on what level of service or amount of data that you're looking for, of course, the level of assurance and the level of authentication may increase. And so we're looking at that as part of our roadmap. We're trying to provide that seamless experience. You know, it's very difficult to manage 10 million, 20 million passwords or to have to go back and look for your adjusted gross income for your tax return from 2012 if you need to provide that information in order to authenticate into a particular service. So it is on our roadmap. We do acknowledge that it's not the most ideal service at the time, but we're working towards that because, again, we have listened to the public. We also know that the general public's expectations have changed dramatically over the years. Taxpayers are expecting a common digital experience, an intuitive digital experience from their federal agencies, the IRS in particular, and we're striving to provide that to the public.
I think we have time for one last quick question, if there are any more from the audience. All right, if no more questions then, please thank me and join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you.
And thank you too.